On June 8, 1900, a Saskatchewan hired hand returned to the farm where he was working. It was late at night, and the family who employed him was fast asleep. John Morrison picked up an axe and headed for the house.
The story begins in England in the late 1800s. Thomas Barnardo was a philanthropist with an idea to send the orphans and street children of British cities to Canada. They became known as home children, and 30,000 of them were sent over. Among them, an orphan named John Morrison.
All of a sudden, here's John Morrison in Canada at the age of 4, and it's my theory that he was fostered out and shuffled from home to home to home, abused along the way, and really treated rotten for most of his childhood.
So is this the old trail, Dave?
It is. It's the Fort Ellis Trail that would have gone from Birtle, Manitoba.
Dave Brindle is an author and broadcaster with family roots around Welwyn, Saskatchewan. He's writing a book about John Morrison. He says the boy ended up on this homestead, working for Alex MacArthur. MacArthur was both postmaster and farmer, supporting his wife and 7 children.
Like most men of that time, I think he was probably, I think he was a mean man. I think he was mean to his family. I think he was inconsiderate to his wife. And I think his business, which was cattle, were more important to him than his family.
Most of the home children were placed on Canadian farms. Some were treated well and accepted as part of their host families. Others were worked like slaves, toiling long hours under harsh conditions for next to nothing.
Little is known about John Morrison or how he was treated during the 5 years he spent working here, except for one critical fact. Morrison became infatuated with MacArthur's 15-year-old daughter Maggie, and that infatuation developed into an obsession.
Until the day that Sandy MacArthur told John Morrison that that's it. You aren't to have anything to do with my daughter anymore. You aren't to have any connection with her at all, or any communication, or stop this nonsense of you thinking that there is going to be anything between you and my daughter.
A hired hand, now in his 20s, courting the young daughter of a community leader would have been unthinkable. But what John Morrison was about to do was even more unthinkable. On a sweltering June night, John Morrison returned late to the MacArthur farmhouse. He grabbed his axe from the barn, entered the house, and headed for Alex MacArthur's bedroom. First, he attacked MacArthur in his bed. The father of 7 was found with deep axe wounds in his head. That was supposed to be Morrison's only victim that night.
He didn't expect Mrs. MacArthur, who is lying with one eye open because she has a 2-week-old baby, to wake up and look at him and say, "Oh." He takes the axe to Mrs. MacArthur, and then he has the bizarre thought. Mrs. MacArthur is dead. Perhaps she'd like to have her children with her.
Morrison continued his bloody work. 4-year-old Russell, 11-year-old Dempsey, 8-year-old Charlie, the same children he'd been playing with just hours earlier, all dead. And the axe continued to rise and fall. Morrison attacked 3 more children, including the baby, but miraculously they would somehow survive. Only 15-year-old Maggie was spared, the object of Morrison's desire. After the killing spree, Morrison sat on Maggie's bed, covered in her family's blood. What happened next isn't clear. He either tried to rape her or profess his love for her. Then he quietly left the house and went to the barn.
Sits down and takes a double-barreled shotgun, which he had gotten from the kitchen on his way out, puts it to his chest. And somehow the gun goes askew and leaves a great gaping wound in his side.
But John Morrison was not dead. Maggie ran barefoot to the neighbors for help.
The neighboring men had gathered to help and to assist and put the pieces together. They immediately wanted to lynch Morrison, but somebody's cooler head prevailed at that time.
The victims of the massacre were buried a few days later. The funeral procession was over 2 miles long. John Morrison recovered from his gunshot wound and admitted to the murders. He was hanged for his crimes 7 months later in Regina.
I think he had lived his entire life with rejection and abandonment, and I think he found a situation for himself here with the MacArthurs that gave him a home, that gave him what he perceived to be as his family for the first time in his life, and his brothers and children. And when that was shattered and it was proven to be false, he snapped.
Alex and Sarah MacArthur, along with 3 of their children, were buried here in the Mooseman Cemetery. The surviving MacArthur children were taken away by relatives. Maggie died of unknown causes just 12 years later. As for the home children, thousands of them made new lives for themselves in Canada and became good citizens. Only one, John Morrison, made a name for himself as a madman. I'm Bill Waiser.